We tend to think of our distant ancestors as simple people, grunting cave dwellers hunched around a fire, barely scraping by, waiting patiently across the millennia for someone clever to finally invent civilization. And it's a comforting story because it makes us, the modern clever ones, the heroes of it. But every so often a shovel bites into the earth and turns up something that shatters that whole comfortable picture. An object or a place or a set of marks on a bone that makes you stop and think, how on earth did they do that? Because the truth is, our ancestors were not simple. They were us, with the same brains, the same curiosity, the same stubborn brilliance, just without the accumulated head start. And when you actually look at what they accomplished tens of thousands of years ago with nothing but stone tools and firelight, the only reasonable reaction is a kind of stunned admiration. Today I want to show you the discoveries that prove it, the finds that reveal our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were, in the best possible sense, absolutely insane. Let's start with music, because you'd assume music is a recent luxury, something you get to after you've sorted out food, shelter, and safety, a civilization's dessert, not its main course. And you'd be wrong. Deep in a cave in southern Germany called Hohle Fels, archaeologists found something astonishing: a flute. A genuine, playable musical instrument, carved from the naturally hollow wing bone of a griffon vulture. It has 5 carefully bored finger holes and a V-shaped notch for a mouthpiece. And it is around 40,000 years old. Sit with that. 40,000 years ago, during the Ice Age, as modern humans were first pushing into a cold and hostile Europe, sharing the continent with Neanderthals and mammoths, someone sat down, selected a bird bone, and engineered a musical instrument. Not a random noisemaker, a tuned flute with finger holes spaced to produce actual notes. Someone had to conceive of melody, understand that a hollow bone could be made to sing, and then have the patience and skill to drill those holes precisely with a stone tool. And here's the part that gets me. This wasn't survival. A flute doesn't feed you or protect you. This was art. It was culture. It means that at the very dawn of our arrival in Europe, before agriculture, before writing, before the wheel, human beings were already making music around the fire. Some researchers even think that shared music helped bind those early groups together, gave them an edge that the Neanderthals lacked. We didn't wait until we were comfortable to make art. We made art because we were human from the very beginning. And there's an even older, even stranger candidate. In a Slovenian cave called Divje Barbe, researchers found a fragment of a cave bear's thigh bone with holes in it. Possibly an even older flute, perhaps made by Neanderthals over 50,000 years ago. Now, I'll be honest with you, as this channel always is, that one is genuinely contested. Some argue the holes were made not by a craftsman, but by the teeth of a scavenging carnivore. The debate is unresolved. But the mere possibility that Neanderthals, the supposed dim cousins, were making music is a beautiful thing. Either way, the message is the same. The drive to make music is almost unbelievably ancient. Now let's talk about something that will make you wince: surgery. In a cave in Borneo, researchers found the skeleton of a young person who had died around 31,000 years ago. And the lower left leg was missing, but not in the way you'd expect. It hadn't been bitten off or broken off. It had been cleanly amputated. A deliberate surgical removal of the lower leg and foot. And here's the staggering part. The bone had healed. The person survived the operation. They lived for years afterward. The withered state of the remaining bone tells us the amputation happened when they were a child, and they went on to reach adulthood. Think about what that requires. 31,000 years ago, with no metal, no anesthetic, no antibiotics, someone performed a successful surgical amputation on a child, navigating around arteries and nerves, cutting through bone, and then keeping the wound clean enough to avoid the infection that, even today, kills a significant fraction of amputation patients. This wasn't a lucky accident. It implies a sophisticated understanding of anatomy, of blood loss, of how to prevent infection, knowledge and skill that we had assumed was tens of thousands of years too advanced for these people. It's not just that they tried, it's that they succeeded, and the patient lived a long life afterward, cared for by their community. It rewrote the timeline of medicine in a single discovery. And speaking of rewriting timelines, let me take you to the single most mind-bending sight of them all. Because there's a place in southern Turkey that, when it was properly understood, broke the entire story of human civilization over its knee. It's called Göbekli Tepe. For the longest time, we had a very tidy narrative for how civilization began. First, we learned to farm. Farming produced surplus food. Surplus food let people settle down in one place and form larger groups. And only then, once we had settled towns and full bellies and spare time, did we build big, complicated things like temples and monuments. Farming first, monuments later. It was the foundation of everything we thought we knew. Göbekli Tepe took that foundation and flipped it completely upside down. Because at Göbekli Tepe, buried under a hill, archaeologists found enormous circular structures, rings of massive T-shaped stone pillars, some of them over 5 meters tall and weighing many tons, intricately carved with images of foxes, boars, snakes, scorpions, vultures. Monumental architecture, a grand, coordinated, ceremonial site. And it dates to around 11,000 years ago, roughly 9,000 BCE, which means it is older than agriculture, older than pottery, older than the wheel, older than writing, older than metal. The people who quarried, carved, transported and raised these colossal stone pillars were hunter-gatherers. They had no farms, they had no cities, they had no draft animals to haul the stones, and yet they organized themselves, hundreds of people by some estimates, to build a monument on a scale we thought was impossible without a settled civilization behind it. And here's the truly radical idea that Göbekli Tepe suggests. It may be that we had the story exactly backwards. It may be that the monument came first, that the desire to gather in large numbers for ritual, for feasting, for a shared belief is what drove people to settle down and eventually to invent farming in order to feed the crowds the monument attracted. In that reading, it wasn't full bellies that gave us temples, it was temples that gave us full bellies. The impulse to build something greater than ourselves may be the very thing that created civilization, rather than a product of it. That's not a minor tweak to history, that's a revolution. And these are just the headliners. The deep past is littered with these little bombshells of human ingenuity. There are cave paintings in places like Chauvet and Lascaux, and even older ones now found in Indonesia, created over 30 and 40,000 years ago, that show not just crude stick figures, but genuine artistic mastery. Perspective, shading, movement, animals rendered with an eye so skilled that Picasso, on seeing them, is said to have remarked that we had learned nothing in the intervening millennia. There are ancient sewing needles, delicately carved from bone, proving our ancestors were making tailored, fitted clothing to survive the Ice Age. There are carved figurines, jewellery made from shells traded across hundreds of miles, evidence of deliberate burial with grave goods, the marks of people with rich inner lives, with beliefs, with art, with love. So what's the thread running through all of it? I think it's this. We have a bad habit of measuring intelligence by technology. We look at someone with a stone axe and assume the person holding it must have a stone axe mind. But that is completely wrong. The person who carved that flute 40,000 years ago had a brain every bit as powerful, as creative, as capable as yours. They simply hadn't inherited 40,000 years of accumulated knowledge to build on. Give that flute maker a modern education and they could fly a plane or write software. Take a modern person and drop them alone into the Ice Age with no tools and no knowledge, and I promise you, they would not invent a tuned vulture bone flute. They'd struggle to survive the week. Our ancestors weren't lesser versions of us. They were us. Brilliant, curious, artistic, and astonishingly capable, working with nothing but their own minds and whatever the world around them provided. And that's what makes these discoveries so staggering. Not that primitive people did something clever, but that people exactly as clever as us did extraordinary things with almost nothing at all. So the next time you picture a caveman, don't picture a grunting brute. Picture a musician carving a flute by firelight. Picture a surgeon saving a child's life with a sharpened stone. Picture a community of hunter-gatherers hauling 20-ton pillars across the landscape to build a temple to something they believed in. Because that's who they actually were. And honestly, when you look at what they pulled off, with none of the advantages we take for granted every single day, I'm not sure insane even does them justice. They were magnificent. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep looking up.